Hi, everyone, and welcome to Get Hired Live. I'm your host, Andrew Seaman, LinkedIn's senior news editor for job searches and careers. I'm coming to you live from a hot and humid New York City. I hope the weather is pleasant wherever you are. And, speaking of that, why don't you tell us where you are and tell us a little bit about yourself? As we do all the time, I want you to start the show by just telling us maybe what you are doing with your career, where you are in your job search, and what you would like to do. Maybe you want to get a promotion, maybe you want to get a new job in a new field. Just keep telling us a little bit about yourself, so that way we could get to know you. And we already have a lot of people introducing themselves. We have Dolores from Texas, Esther from Queens, Anna from Romania, Ahmet from Turkey, William from Texas, Julia from Connecticut, Derek from Colorado, Vikas from India, CJ from Arizona, and Anita from the Bay Area. So hello to all of you. Keep introducing yourself in the comments. And then what I want you to do is to connect with each other. So maybe you see someone in your region of the world. Maybe you see someone who is interested in the same things you are. Maybe they work in a field where you want to go into, or maybe you work in a field that they want to go into. Connect with each other, because networking is the foundation of a successful job search, and there's no better time to start than right now. So be sure to make those connections and then get your questions in, because we'll be taking your job search and career questions in just a bit. We have a really great guest today. And in fact, let's bring him onto the screen. We have the CEO and founder of Onsulting. Welcome to Jonathan Javier. Welcome, Jonathan.
Hey, Andrew, how's it going? And how's everybody doing? I see so many different locations, Canada, Texas. Oh my gosh. I'm in Canada right now, so.
Yes, and we have Adil from Iraq. We have Melissa from Utah, Joseph from Canada, Andrew from Nigeria, Donna from Boston, Craig from Queens, right across the river from me. I'm in South Harlem. Then we have Mike from South Carolina and Saeed from Ohio. So welcome to everyone. We have people from all over the world. And, we were talking about a few topics before the show, but we were really talking about social media, because everyone has some form of social media. After all, they're on LinkedIn right now. And what is the role of social media in a job search? Because a lot of people, they view themselves as sort of singular figures on a resume, and they send it in with an application and they assume that's what employers see. But employers really see a lot more. So can you tell us what the role of social media is?
Yeah, it's huge, Andrew, that's for sure. And I want to actually ask the crowd here and ask the audience, who here is active on social media? I love asking this question, especially in workshops. Like, are you active or passive on social media? On LinkedIn specifically. So LinkedIn plays a huge play, especially for those who are on their job search right now. Make sure that you have an optimized profile. It's extremely important. And for me, like for my roles, like I worked at Snap, Google, and Cisco, I actually landed them all through social media, whether it was in regards to reaching out to different hiring managers or professionals or creating LinkedIn content. So if you're active in creating LinkedIn content, you're going to be able to build a digital presence around yourself where you're not only going to be based on your piece of paper, right, on a black and white piece of paper, but also through your digital presence in your LinkedIn profile, which I'm going to be talking about today. So it seems like a lot of people in here are active and passive is a lot of different folks, but I'm going to be talking a lot about that today.
Yeah, and I'm just seeing that we have a lot of people talking about their social media use and their social media habits. And Dolores says social media makes it fast and easy to stay in touch and meet new connections. So obviously, they're on LinkedIn at least, and it looks like we got a lot of people who are also on other social media. And for people who are trying to figure out, okay, well, how can I use social media in my job search? Because, maybe, you post pictures, like I post pictures of my cats on Instagram and on Facebook and stuff. But for someone who says, I want to get a job through social media, or I want to use it to propel my job search, what tips do you have for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first part is just starting, Andrew. I think a lot of people get scared because they think that they'll get judged. Like, oh my gosh, like, should I post this? Should I post that? In reality, creating LinkedIn content or creating social media content in general is going to be able to spearhead your job search tremendously. So what I'd recommend everybody is, especially when you're creating content, is to talk about your own story. So a lot of people, for example, who here comes from a first generation background? A lot of you probably do. Talk about how you came from a first generation background, how you got inspired to get into your career, And at the end, everybody, you have to have a call to action. The call to action should talk about what you're trying to get into your career. So what I tell people all the time, for example, who are in product management, at the end, I'll say, for those who are interested in product management, or for those who are in product management, I'd love to connect. Because then what'll happen is people will then go to your profile who are product managers or in that particular field. And then you go to who's viewed your profile, and then you go add them on LinkedIn. So then you send them a personalized invite, and that'll be able to expand your connections immensely, which could then lead to coffee chats, informational interviews, possible referrals. Another thing too as well is to, of course, make sure your profile is extremely optimized, because when you're going to be reaching out to different folks on LinkedIn, they're going to be taking a look at your LinkedIn profile. Everybody here, how many seconds do you think a person on average takes a look at a LinkedIn profile? Give me a guess in the comments. Is it a minute? Is it 10 seconds? Is it 5 seconds? Well, I already said the answer. It's about 10 seconds. I'm actually doing a workshop on this later. 10 seconds. So you have to make sure that you have a hook, and you have people, when they're looking at your profile, they're like, oh my gosh, I really want to read more about this person. So make sure to do that. And last but not least, we actually created a LinkedIn profile called Wendy Javier, aka Wansulting Wendy. If you search it on LinkedIn, Wendy Javier, it'll actually show you exactly what you need in your LinkedIn profile, whether it's your about section, your experience, your skills. Definitely utilize that. It's going to be help you get a job in 2021.
Got it. And actually, we have a lot of people in the comments who are saying that they follow you on TikTok. So Caitlin says you've helped her pivot her career goals. And Sweta, our friend, asked, have you found job seekers are getting traction on TikTok? What is your tips for job seekers?
Yeah, so we actually helped launch TikTok resumes last month. And it's pretty crazy, Andrew. Like, a lot of the different videos that people are putting out, and it puts the power into the job seeker when you're creating content. So for example, not only on TikTok, there was actually a girl who was a student at USC, and she created a TikTok video specifically getting an internship at Nickelodeon. So she really wanted to work at Nickelodeon, and Nickelodeon picked it up, and she was able to get an offer. The same thing happened specifically on both LinkedIn, Twitter, with Emily Vu, who specifically was wanting to be an intern at Spotify, and she got picked up by the CEO and she got an offer. So it really does tie in that the power is in the job seeker. When you create LinkedIn content, whenever you create social media content, that helps you build your digital presence, and you never know what other opportunities are out there that people can reach out to you instead of you always having to reach out to people. So it always comes, I call it reactive recruiting, where opportunities come to you instead of you always having to seek opportunities.
Yeah, and I think I did see that TikTok resumes. It's actually a separate site, so you won't find it necessarily on the app. But I did see that they launched that. And I want to take a quick moment too to say hi to some other people who joined the stream. We have Stephanie from Cape Cod, Danielle from Minnesota, Helen from Connecticut, Kamara from New Mexico, Dawn from New Jersey, and Danny from Florida. So welcome to all of you. A quick reminder to get your questions in, because we're going to be taking them in just a bit. And Jonathan, one thing that I was wondering about is, because obviously there are the benefits of like you said, getting in front of the CEO of Spotify, getting in front of CEOs of a company that you want to work for, and maybe they could pass it along to the recruiting team and say, hey, this person seems promising. But what are the downsides of social media? Because obviously there are some job seekers that, they post a lot. Maybe they air a lot of grievances on social media, or, they post things that are not necessarily telling the story that they want an employer to hear. What are your tips, or what are your suggestions for people who maybe are job searching? Are employers looking at their social media, do you think?
100% they are. Always remember, everybody, if you're making social media content anywhere, whether it's LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, you have to remember that employers can definitely find your profile. So make sure when you are creating content, think to yourself, would my parents approve of this? Would my friends approve of this? And that's when you're able to build that digital presence around yourself. Think about too as well, if someone were to go to your LinkedIn profile, if someone were to look at your specific posts, what are some words that would come to mind? For a quick question right here, everybody. When you think of Andrew, what are some words that come to mind, right? Get hired. He's bringing on amazing guests. Okay. But you see what I mean? Like Andrew, for example, has built such an amazing digital presence that that he's hosting all these different amazing LinkedIn lives with different job search experts, etc. So when you're able to build that personal brand around yourself, that's when people are like, oh, I need someone specifically for this strategy and operations role in my company. I remember Angela, or, oh, I remember this product manager who was talking about it on LinkedIn. I want to hire Sherry. So that's why you have to make sure that your LinkedIn profile is optimized. And one thing, everybody, I'll actually plug this in real quick. A really quick tip that I used to do all the time was, so I wanted to be in operations and strategy. And so what I did was I actually would search strategy and operations on LinkedIn, and I would go find the first people that would show up. And what happens is I would click their profile, and in their experience parts, they'll literally talk about what they did in their specific roles. And so what I would do is I take those specific skills and I'd also include it on my own LinkedIn profile if it was applicable and if I've utilized it in past projects or different work experiences. So then you can see whether or not these people, for example, are being able to utilize those skills, and you can too as well.
Yeah. And something else that I've learned along the way is that there are some employers, because employers sometimes use background check systems or background check companies to vet candidates for them, because there are legal issues that people run into sometimes when they look at a person's profile. So to create some safe distance, they'll have a company do that for them. And there are companies that basically will give a readout on a person's social media profile to say, hey, this is on their profile, this is on their profile. So they'll know sort of what is on there, and without looking at it even. So they are interested in seeing what your digital footprint is. And that's something that I've learned along the way, is that it's a product basically that employers can sometimes purchase from these companies.
And Andrew, I was going to
Go
mention
ahead.
too as well, for your LinkedIn profile, in that about section, I love that you mentioned that. In your about section, everybody, tell your story. I think a lot of people, for example, Andrew, will just say experienced in XYZ. Share your stories. Say that you're from a first generation background. Say what you like to do outside of work. You know, a lot of these people that you're going to be connecting with on LinkedIn, they also have a human side, right? It's not just a professional side, the human approach. Like, I love basketball. Who loves basketball? Maybe a lot of you. Who loves sushi? I love sushi. See? So
Yeah. And well, and I do want to, we have some questions that we're getting in, so I want to move to those. And I just want to say a quick hello to Willie from Syracuse, Manawara from Toronto, who I think joins us every once in a while, Anna from Sacramento, Sherry from Tennessee, William from Vancouver, Canada again. And then we have Angela from Kentucky, Gwen from California, Naveen from India, Jesse from St. Louis, and Juan from Puerto Rico. So welcome to all of you. And the first question I want to start off with is from Andy, who says the biggest problem with the recruitment process is lack of constructive feedback, knowing specifically what the candidate needs to improve on. How can this be remedied? So if you're a job seeker and you've gone through an interview process and they just say, hey, sorry, we're going in a different direction, do you have any suggestions to get feedback from them, or to say, hey, is there something I can improve on?
yeah, I mean, what you can do, and what I tell people all the time is, of course, ask for that feedback. And if they can't provide that feedback, sometimes it's due to legal obligations, as people like to say. What I like to do all the time is I'll actually go to my friends or people that I prep with for mock interviews, and I'll literally practice with them, and I'll try to get their constructive feedback so I can be able to utilize it in my next interviews. When I was actually interviewing at LinkedIn was actually one of the companies that gave me constructive feedback. And I remember one of the feedback that I got was prioritization. I still remember this. It was about 3-4 years ago. So, like I love to say is, if you never ask, you never know, and if you never ask, the answer is always no. So just ask for that feedback, and if you don't get it, go practice with people that you know, and tell them to give you constructive feedback so you can utilize in your next interviews.
Yeah, and I think in my experience here, LinkedIn does sort of say, we want to give you some feedback before we move forward, so that way people can use that for their own gain.
Exactly.
And we have a question here from Kamara that I think is really good. Are employers looking at your profile only, or are they looking at what others have posted about you?
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, they definitely could search it on LinkedIn, etc. I think what happens all the time is, for us, for example, for Wansulting, we have a lot of people posting about Wansulting, and that's how they actually know a lot about us. But yeah, definitely, if someone's posting about you and it's a good article, for example, share it on your social media, share it on your LinkedIn. What I'd actually recommend is, if people are talking about you and you have, like, for example, let's say that you're featured on LinkedIn News, Let's say you're featured on Fox, right? Put that specifically in your featured section, but also add that to your about section on LinkedIn, because then people can then go to those links and see more about you. And you can also talk about it in interviews too.
Yeah, no, that's all really good points. And, and I think, and especially if you're going for a high level position, that's when they'll really dig into a person's background. And, it's always important to Google yourself every once in a while,
Yeah.
just to see what pops up, because social media posts sometimes pop up there. Your LinkedIn profile will be obviously near the top, so you want to make sure that's as nice as it can be. But you also just want to see what else is on the first page or the second page, just to see what others are posting about you, or to see if other people with your name are getting into trouble, because that can sometimes cause an issue for you, unfortunately.
Right.
And we have a question here from Dolores, who says, are there staple platforms that all job seekers should use regardless of their age or industry?
Yeah, great question. So I think that, of course, I'm very biased with LinkedIn. So definitely be utilizing LinkedIn. Like you're obviously using LinkedIn right now. What I'd recommend is definitely reaching out to peers on LinkedIn that are in specific positions that you are interested in getting into, because they're going to be able to give you the insights which you could put on your resume and also utilizing your application process and your interviews. So definitely recommend utilizing LinkedIn. Number two, when TikTok resumes was actually out, a lot of people associate TikTok with Gen Z or with younger generations, but in fact, a lot of the different positions were actually manager level positions. There were about 100 plus positions that were being recruited for manager level and higher. So you can definitely utilize that platform too as well. And then also I'd recommend, if you're prepping for interviews, definitely utilize Glassdoor, levels.fyi. So then you'll be able to prep for those interviews, and also that you can see possible compensation too as well that you should be compensated for in the roles that you're interested in.
Got it. No, that's a good point. And then I did see in the comments, because I mentioned a legal issue with checking social media. What I was referring to is that depending on where you live, there are obviously anti-discrimination laws, things like that. For example, ageism. So there's a lot of misinformation about how ageism plays a role in the hiring process. Ageism is obviously very real, but the laws around it are very interesting, I'll say. So basically, in most of the United States, a person in an interview can actually ask your age, but they can't use that information against you. So a lot of times companies don't want any liability, so they don't even want to necessarily look at your picture or anything like that. So that's why they may have another company look at your social media for you. They do it in a very systematic way that sort of removes all liability on their end. So that's what I was mentioning with legal. And then, Jonathan, we have a question. Well, it's not really a question, but Manawara says that they've been ghosted by probably 8 out of 10 recruiters. I get that they're busy, but to me, it's a bit unprofessional. Do you have any advice for overcoming that issue? Because I know there's so many people who get ghosted, which is basically you've
Yeah.
had an interview, you've had some interaction, but now all of a sudden these people just disappear, basically.
I definitely empathize with that. And I'm so sorry to hear about the ghosting. It happens a lot. So what I'd recommend is, what's the worst thing that can happen if you follow up with them? Nothing. The worst thing that can happen is they don't respond again. I actually made a LinkedIn poll about 2 weeks ago, and I talked about how many times should you follow up with someone. And most people said only once. What I'd recommend is following up 2 to 3 times, even more. Salespeople all the time are really good at this. They go to my email and they send me like 5 emails. And then finally I'm like, okay, maybe let's talk. Right. At the end of the day, you want to get a response, definitely follow up with them. And you know what you can do too as well? So your first follow-up, you just say, hey, just following up on my previous message or a previous conversation, please let me know if any updates. Then the second follow-up after that, you can send this very similar concept to as well. But this also comes into play during your interview, everybody. What I'd recommend everybody to do is, when you're asking questions at the end, ask them for a specific timeline. So whenever I used to interview and whenever I tell people is, ask the question of, when should I be hearing back about next steps? Because then you'll have in the back of your head, I'm going to hear back Wednesday. And if you don't hear back Wednesday, then you follow up the next morning. So definitely try to get those timelines so you can be able to follow up. But at the end of the day, follow up. The worst thing that can happen is no response, but the best thing that can happen is a response.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think, like you said, just sort of sticking in their mind, following up. And the thing that I always say is don't burn your bridges, because I think a lot of times people, they will get upset that they haven't heard back. And I always suggest, you don't know why you haven't heard back. Maybe a month later, they'll come back and say, hey, guess what? That role's still open. I was on vacation, or the hiring manager had to take a leave unexpectedly, something like that. And you
Mm.
don't want to burn that bridge because you might have to go across it still. Um,
Oh,
and
Andrew, I was
yeah,
going to
go.
mention too as well, really quickly. I actually followed up 3 times when I was interviewing before. And after she said, oh, the position got filled, and I was totally fine. But the thing was, I followed up a week after, and then she actually had another role from another team. So always remember, everybody, that stay in touch with people, right?
Yeah.
Stay in touch. Most people will not stay in touch. I used to say all the time, stay in touch every 3 months with people, and you never know any opportunities that they may have.
And especially at large companies, like if you're dealing with a Microsoft and IBM or something like that, there are so many minor differences between positions that you may not be right for the one you applied for, but all of a sudden there's a minor change in the position for another team, and you're actually perfect. So I know at Amazon, they're doing, I forget the name of the program, but basically you apply once if you're a software engineer, and they give you a choice of different positions, and then you get to pick the one that seems right to you. So I think there's some awakening around that idea that, even if you're not perfect for one position, you may be the best fit for another one. And we have another question here, and this is also from Kamara, who says, why would employers ask for a picture of you? I've seen this with some employers. Have you heard of that before? I know it used to be common in
Yeah.
some European countries, but they've moved away from that for the most part.
Yeah, I haven't heard much of that anymore because according to a lot of different sources, it creates a bias. So yeah, definitely you don't need a picture for, especially in the US here. But I'd recommend, I actually made a TikTok video on this yesterday. I was like, don't put pictures on your resumes, because some people will put pictures and it will take up a lot of space, and that of course might create bias too as well. So yeah, you don't have to, you shouldn't be required to send in a picture to an employer. Unless they're
Yeah.
just trying to see if you're a legit person, not a bot.
Yes, definitely. Now, there are some companies that are using some virtual reality, or I don't know how to best describe it, but basically video interviews where you have to send in a video of yourself answering certain
That's right.
questions.
Mhm.
And basically that is sort of how they interview you at some companies. But I haven't heard about a picture, though.
Mm.
But obviously the videos where you answer, tell me about yourself, or tell me your greatest weakness, or something like that. Some companies put that into a computer and analyze that for better or for worse.
Right.
And we have a question here from Olka, who asks, what do you say when you're trying to network with someone you don't know, or you haven't talked with them on LinkedIn for a while?
That's such a great question. I'll give 2 answers for this: initial message and then staying in touch. My question to everybody is this: when you reach out to someone, would you respond to yourself? That is something you have to ask yourself, because most people, Andrew, will literally be like this: hey, give me a job, right? And the thing is, like, would you respond to that? So what you have to do, everybody, is build that rapport. The first part of it is sending a personalized invite. Most people will not send personalized invites. In my experience, under 2% of people will send a personalized invite, even though I say it all the time. So send a personalized invite, structure it with the introduction of yourself, your current occupation, what you found interesting about their profile and why you want to connect, and then a thank you, right? So that's the first part of sending that initial message. If you're trying to stay in touch, give them updates on what you've been up to for the past 3 months or whatever time frame. So what I like to say all the time is I have notes about the person, which for my first conversation, and I'll mention that in my follow-up email, and I'll give them about 3 updates. I'll usually update them for 3 months or during holidays. So right before Thanksgiving, for example, I'll send them, say, hey, happy Thanksgiving. I'm super thankful for you. This is what I've been up to for the past 3 months, XYZ. And then the last part is, of course, the call to action, which is maybe let's hop on the phone sometime to catch up. Or you talk about, I'm still on my job search. Would you have any tips? So just to reiterate, everybody, if you are sending a message to someone, if you're connecting with someone, ask yourself, would you add this person yourself with that follow-up template or follow-up message that you're sending?
Yeah, definitely. And we actually have a follow-up question about sort of the submitting photos with jobs. And what about social media profiles? Is that, how does that work? Is that more or less, that confirms you're not a bot?
Yeah.
So, so is that sort of a safe thing to do?
Yeah, definitely add it to your profiles. What I'd recommend everybody, and I didn't know this for the longest time about 3 years ago, but on your LinkedIn, sometimes people cannot see your profile picture. So make sure that you have your profile picture in public so then people can see that you're an actual person. How you can do this is specifically go to the settings and go to your profile, and you can say second connections, for example, if you're comfortable with second connections only, or you can do all basically public. So, and the reason why you want to do that is because if you're reaching out to someone, for example, if someone were to reach out to me and they didn't have a picture, I wouldn't know if they were a bot or not, unless I specifically went through their LinkedIn profile. So that's a little quick tip for those who are trying to add people on LinkedIn.
Got it. And we have a question, and it's sort of a statement, but Kunshin says companies don't delete a job post in an advertisement if the position has been filled. This is a big problem for job seekers. What is your suggestion around that? Because obviously there are some companies that maybe they don't take down job ads immediately, or sometimes they leave them up because they're basically always recruiting for that position. What is your suggestion to people? Should they still apply? How do they tell if one is maybe sort of a dinosaur ad? What is your suggestion for that?
Yeah, this also brings about that you should definitely apply early or network early, because a lot of people, Andrew, will apply to different roles that have already been out for a month, and those are probably either filled or a lot of different candidates are already in interview processes, and they're probably only hiring one candidate, for example, for early career / professional roles. So be sure to specifically go for the roles that have been at least a week or earlier that have been posted, because the ones that are usually a month later are usually ones that have already been filled. But like I said before, this brings up the concept of networking early, everybody. Make sure you network early, network before the positions are out, because when the positions are out, then you can reach out to these different people and you can possibly get referrals or recommendations and insights to make that great resume so you can get an interview.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. And, before we go, when people maybe sign off from the show, what is the one thing you would want them to do with their social media to improve their odds of finding work?
Yeah, you know what everybody should do, Andrew? Everybody should make a LinkedIn post about this event and tag myself and Andrew and LinkedIn News and put hashtag get hired. And the reason why is because what'll happen is we have a lot of different connections, right? And I tell people this all the time. Like, I think I have now 116,000 followers. If I like and comment on it, and Andrew too as well, if Andrew sees it too as well, what'll happen is people will then organically go to your LinkedIn profile and be like, who's Leroy? Who's Chandra? Right? And what'll happen is our network can become your network. You can add people on LinkedIn, and that's how reactive recruiting happens, where you don't have to always reach out to people and go find them. People will find you. So what I recommend is everybody definitely make some LinkedIn content, go from passive to active. And last but not least, make sure that LinkedIn profile is optimized. Utilize that Wendy Javier profile, as I said before, and you can turn from an underdog into a winner, as we love to say.
Yes, and your company, Onesulting, combines winning and consulting, which is where the name came from. And I learned that before the show. Yes, I know, and that's great advice. And what I always tell people, especially when they're sharing on social media, add to the conversation. So don't just share something. Make sure that you're taking a step further. Say something that you learned. Say something that you wanted to add to the conversation, and that way it pushes it forward. And people get an inside look at what you think, how you think, and what you view, and how you sort of process information. But I think that's a really great advice. And obviously we've been showing your LinkedIn profile at the bottom of the screen, Jonathan. So I really hope everyone is following you for your great content. And before you go, can you tell us one more time? We had a few people in the comments asking about that Wendy profile. So where can they find that, and what's the name?
Yeah, it's on LinkedIn, actually. It's called Wendy Javier. I say it's my cousin, but it's a profile for the community, just to help you all with some free resources, which we're always trying to provide to everybody. So
got it. And obviously follow Jonathan as well. And thank you so much, Jonathan. He's the CEO and founder of Onesulting.
awesome.
And Thank you for joining us. And thank you all out there for joining us. As always, we're so happy that you did. And we'll be off next week. So we're usually here on Fridays, but we'll be off next week. But then we'll be back in early September, and we'll be back at our normal time at noon Eastern time. Now that the summer is over, we're getting back to our normal schedule. But don't worry, we still have ton of content that's appearing on the LinkedIn news page, which is where you're watching the show right now. And on Monday, my colleague Nina Melendez will be talking about a somewhat depressing topic for some of us, such as someone who has 2 degrees in journalism. And my colleague Nina Melendez on the 30th, which is Monday, she'll be talking with an education policy expert about college degrees that are worth the debt. And that's Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern time. And again, that's on the LinkedIn news page. So be sure to catch that, RSVP. And spoiler alert, as I always tell people, if you want a career for money, be an anesthesiologist. So hopefully that's some helpful over the weekend. But until next time, please stay safe. The pandemic is still going on all around the world, and things are a little bit up and down. So be sure to follow local health guidelines, because you can only get hired, you can only be a good candidate if you're healthy and well enough to do so. So be sure to follow those guidelines, be safe, and until next time, best of luck.